Welcome to my channel, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating narratives that spark your imagination. Let's start today's new narrative story. James Miller sat at the kitchen table, sipping his morning coffee, a peaceful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the early hours of the day. His daughters, Emily and Lily, were still asleep upstairs, and his wife, Sarah, was preparing breakfast. Life in their quiet suburban neighborhood in Boston had become a familiar rhythm, one James had always cherished. At 46, James considered himself a lucky man. He owned a successful software development company, which had allowed him to provide a comfortable life for his family. His wife, Sarah, had been the love of his life since they met in college. She had given up her career in marketing to focus on raising their two daughters, a sacrifice that James had always admired. Their marriage, though not without its ups and downs, seemed solid. Their daughters were the pride and joy of their lives. Emily, at 18, was getting ready to graduate high school and go off to college, while Lily, their youngest at 16, was navigating her teenage years with her characteristic fire and sass. But as the morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows, casting a warm glow on the walls, James had no idea that the life he treasured was about to be shattered. It began with small things that James didn't notice at first because he trusted Sarah so completely. She had started staying out later than usual, telling him that she had joined a local book club. She had been pulling away, emotionally and physically, claiming to be exhausted from managing the house and dealing with the girls. James didn't think much of it. After all, they had been married for 20 years, and every marriage went through phases, didn't it? But one evening, something felt different. They were watching TV, a show they used to enjoy together, but Sarah seemed distracted. Her phone buzzed multiple times, and each time she looked at it, a slight smile crossed her lips, one James hadn't seen in a long time. He didn't ask about it, trusting her fully. He figured it was probably a message from one of her book club friends, maybe organizing their next meeting. Yet over the next few weeks, Sarah's behavior continued to change. She became more distant, more evasive. There were whispers when she talked on the phone, laughter behind closed doors, and those late nights at the book club became more frequent. James noticed her dressing up more often, wearing perfume even when she wasn't going anywhere special. Something gnawed at him, but he dismissed it, telling himself not to overthink things. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening, and James had been working late to meet a deadline for a major client. By the time he got home, the house was unusually quiet. Sarah was in the shower, and both daughters were out for the evening. Emily with her boyfriend, Mark Anderson, and Lily at a friend's house for a sleepover. James took a deep breath, relishing the silence. He poured himself a glass of wine and settled into the living room, but something nagged at him. Sarah's phone was on the kitchen counter, unlocked. It buzzed once, and out of sheer reflex, James glanced at the screen. His heart froze. The message read, "Last night was incredible, Sarah. I can't wait to see you again. Love, Mark." Mark, his daughter Emily's boyfriend, his 18-year-old daughter's boyfriend. James stared at the phone, his mind racing. This couldn't be right. There had to be some explanation, some mistake. But his hands moved on their own as he scrolled through Sarah's text messages. There were dozens of them, messages that painted a picture too clear to ignore. Texts full of flirtation, secret rendezvous, and confessions of love. Messages confirming that Sarah had been seeing Mark behind Emily's back for months. James felt sick. His stomach churned, and he could barely breathe as the full weight of the betrayal hit him. His wife, the woman he had loved for 2 decades, had not only cheated on him but had done so with their daughter's boyfriend. The pain was excruciating. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the complete and utter destruction of trust, the impact this would have on his daughter's life, and the sheer audacity of Sarah's actions. He put the phone down, his hands shaking. His mind raced, a million thoughts colliding at once. How long had this been going on? Why? What would Emily do if she found out? James stood there, frozen in disbelief, unsure of what to do next. The sound of the shower stopped, and James could hear Sarah moving around in the bathroom, oblivious to the storm brewing downstairs. The confrontation came quickly. James couldn't hold it in any longer. When Sarah came downstairs, still wrapped in her towel, he was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of him. "Sarah," he said, his voice low but full of controlled fury. "What is this?" Sarah stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening as she saw her phone in his hands. For a split second, her face went pale, but then she quickly tried to compose herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice wavering slightly as she reached for the phone, but James was already on his feet. "You don't know what I'm talking about?" His voice rose, filled with raw emotion. "You're having an affair with Emily's boyfriend. Her boyfriend, Sarah. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sarah's face crumbled, and she covered her mouth with her hands as tears welled up in her eyes. "James, I'm so sorry," she whispered. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to—" "You didn't mean for it to happen?" James interrupted, incredulous. "You've been sneaking around with an 18-year-old Sarah. You've been lying to me, to our family, to Emily." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she tried to explain, but her excuses felt hollow, and James didn't care to listen. How could she have done something so reckless, so destructive? There was no coming back from this. "I'm filing for divorce," James said coldly, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "I want you out of this house. You've betrayed me, you've betrayed our family, and I'll never forgive you for what you've done." The next morning, James woke up early, determined to do what needed to be done. He couldn't let this go on any longer. He sat Emily down at the kitchen table, his heart breaking for what he was about to tell her. "Emily," he began softly, "there's something you need to know. I don't want to hurt you, but you deserve the truth." Emily's brow furrowed in confusion. "What's going on, Dad?" He took a deep breath, his chest tight with the weight of the words he was about to say. Your mother has been having an affair." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "What? With who?" James swallowed hard, the bitterness of the truth burning in his throat. "With Mark, your boyfriend." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Emily stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief, as if the words couldn't possibly be real. And then, all at once, the reality crashed down on her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she let out a cry of anguish. No, that's not possible. Mark wouldn't, Mom wouldn't." But James only nodded, his own heart breaking as he watched his daughter's world crumble before his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emily." Emily's sobs filled the room as she collapsed into James's arms, her body shaking with the force of her grief. How could they do this to me? How could she do this? The weeks that followed were filled with bitterness and heartache. Sarah had moved out, her relationship with Emily shattered beyond repair. James filed for divorce, hiring the best attorney in Boston to ensure that Sarah's betrayal would not be swept under the rug. He wasn't out for revenge in a vindictive sense, but he wanted to make sure that Sarah faced the consequences of her actions. The divorce proceedings were messy, with Sarah's affair becoming the focal point. In court, Sarah's character was torn apart, her infidelity laid bare for all to see. She lost custody of both daughters, and her reputation in their tight-knit community was ruined. It was the ultimate fall from grace for someone who had once been seen as the perfect mother and wife. Meanwhile, Emily was left to pick up the pieces of her own broken heart. She had broken up with Mark immediately after finding out about the affair, refusing to even look at him again. The betrayal from both her mother and her boyfriend had left her scarred, and James did everything he could to support her through the pain. He knew that the healing process would take time, but he was determined to be there for her every step of the way. Months passed, and slowly, life began to settle into a new normal. James focused on rebuilding his life, pouring his energy into his work and into being the best father he could be for Emily and Lily. Though the pain of Sarah's betrayal still lingered, it no longer consumed him. He had found a way to move forward, not by forgetting, but by accepting that some things, no matter how painful, were beyond his control. Emily, too, began to heal. With time, she found strength in herself that she hadn't known she had. She focused on her future, applying to colleges and making plans to leave Boston and start a new chapter of her life. Though the scars of her mother's actions would always remain, they no longer defined her. As for Sarah, she tried to apologize, tried to rebuild the relationships she had destroyed, but the damage was too great. She was left alone, facing the consequences of her choices, as James and the girls moved on without her. In the end, James learned a valuable lesson. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But he also learned that betrayal, no matter how deep, doesn't have to define your life. With his daughters by his side, he found the strength to move forward, to create a new future. The love he had for his family remained, and that more than anything gave him peace. Thank you for watching. What do you think of James's decision? How would you have handled such a devastating betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Double.